Greetings, Budget Committee. My name is Tom Boyott, and I'm the Community Development Director in Development and Public Works. It's my pleasure to be here today, a privilege actually, presenting the Community Development Budget as well as the city's capital budget. Before I start, I'd really like to thank both returning and new Budget Committee members for your commitment to Springfield and for the gift of your time. There is a fair amount of material to cover today in a short amount of time. So please note any questions that you may have along the way, and by all means go back and re-refer to the slide deck. I know bullets are for reading and I'm actually talking to you. But note any questions that you have and send those along to Neil Obringer in Finance, and we will get those questions answered for you. The work we do in Springfield is focused on the future of the city, primarily through the built environment, both on the private side with land development and on the public side with infrastructure. We do this work within the city limits and with a couple of limitations. Primarily, we do this work in the urban growth boundary as well. My goal for today's presentation is to describe the work by looking at key service areas and how we staff those service areas, how the service areas are funded, and where that funding comes from. I also plan to cover accomplishments for the current budget year as well as initiatives and a look ahead. The presentation is divided into two parts: the Community Development Operating Budget and the City Capital Budget. So let's get started and take a look at that operating budget. When we look at the operating budget, there are a couple of reasons behind the bottom line increases between 2021 and 2022. The most significant one is the addition of $1 million for wastewater and stormwater master plan updates. As we wrap up our projects from the last generation of master plans, it's time to look at the next suite of needs in both of those systems. Funds for this work is moving into the operating budget from capital reserves, and will cover consultant contracts to deliver the plan updates. The balance of the increase is additional pass-through federal CDBG COVID-19 relief funding, plus the normal increases in labor and materials year over year, and frankly, increased investments in remote work technology like phones, Zoom licenses, laptops, and modern collaboration and file storage tools. The proposed addition of 1.0 FTE in this budget is for a business systems analyst to create an operationalized and improved and more complete online customer experience for our development customers to meet their expectations as we continue into the 21st century. Over the past year, working in a pandemic environment has really underscored for us the value of investing in digitally delivered business services. As proposed, this position will be funded by the technology fee revenue and contributions, reallocations from the building code, street, wastewater, stormwater, and general funds, and the new position has a marginal impact on our year-over-year bottom line. If we net out the $1 million increase for infrastructure master planning, the 2022 operating budget is about a 3.2% increase over 2021. Next, I want to talk about our key service areas described as described on this slide. This is really the work that community development provides to Springfield, and it is the work that we do. In the development center, this is our largest business line, both by FTE and budget, and I'll show you those numbers a little bit later in the presentation. The development center is where we partner with our customers to approve land use applications and building permits, and also engineering approvals for privately constructed public infrastructure that is built on the private side, gets dedicated to the public, and then the public owns, operates, maintains, and improves that infrastructure. This group in the development center also includes a variety of other related programs like the survey program, business licensing, and code compliance. And staff in the development center also support the Springfield Historic Commission. Infrastructure capital is where we plan for the infrastructure needs of our growing community and develop and deliver projects in the public systems of pipes, streets, swales and drainage ways, and buildings and facilities. These capital projects could be system replacements, upgrades, preservation work, or construction of new facilities. I'll add that infrastructure is the subject of the follow-on presentation of the capital budget, and so I plan to cover that in a bit more detail when we get there. Land use planning is the program where we manage Springfield's state-mandated comprehensive plan, neighborhood and district refinement plans, zoning, and urbanization as that land in the urban growth boundary transitions from rural to become part of the city. The Development Code Update Project and the Council's Affordable Housing Strategy are staffed in this group, and the team also staffs the Springfield Planning Commission. Federal Housing and Community Services is one of our smaller programs by FTE at roughly 2. FTE, this group manages our Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG program, and our Home Investment Partnership program, also a federal HUD program, but we deliver that in partnership with the City of Eugene as the lead agency. This group staffs the CDBG, which is the Community Development Advisory Committee, and works with the City Council and that CDAC, along with our agency partners, to get federal pass-through funds out into the community to support provision of needed housing and other services. Federal State Transportation Planning Program is another small but significant program that helps Springfield meet our state and federal transportation planning requirements. These are legislated requirements. This team works to secure federal discretionary dollars through the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization. Staff supports council representation on ODOT's Lane Area Commission of Transportation, again, federal MPO, Central Lane MPO policy body, which we always refer to as MPC, Metropolitan Policy Committee, and also the Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium, which is a consortium made up of the state's 6 MPOs. About 90% of revenue generated by this program does not pass through the city's capital budget and is instead held by ODOT and paid directly to contractors on city-managed, federally funded transportation projects. There will be typically a 10 to 12% minimum local match requirement to secure those federal dollars, and that 10 to 12% will show up in our capital budget. So this slide is going to give you an idea of how our staff is allocated by service area. It does include the addition of the FTE for the business systems analyst that I described earlier. Here again, you can see that just over 60% of the team is dedicated to development services. Another 20% staffs capital infrastructure, and that balance of 20% goes to the 3 remaining programs of land use planning, housing, and transportation. To take another angle on this, our budget by service area shows you again how dollars are allocated to the work that we do. Something to note here, and it's pretty much the same every year, is that the dollars for housing and community services is a larger share of the budget by service area than the FTE by service area. And this is because most of those federal funds pass through our budget and are spent by community partners on designated activity. I do like to highlight this because the pass-through is about 15% of the overall operating budget. So take our operating budget, pass 15% through, and what's left is what we operate on. If we look at the 2022 budget, this federal pass-through, along with the infrastructure master plan expenditures for consulted services and several other additional increases like COVID-19, CDBG relief, is really the reason that the personnel and budget by service area appear misaligned. And I want to tell you that the same thing is going on in revenues by fund. Here in revenues by fund, we can look at the funds that support community development's work. Again, this shows the increases in the sewer and storm drainage funds for master planning and community development fund, that $2.07 million, most of which again is passing through the budget. From the revenue standpoint, if we net these two costs out, the majority of the community development's key services are funded with about 77% of the $11.1 million bottom line operating, and 77% of that is about $8.5 million. So let me move on to some of the outcomes and accomplishments. For me, really, the key accomplishment in 2021 was our COVID-19 business response, what we call in emergency management lingo, continuity of operations. To achieve business continuity, we made a complete shift in workplace location and the technology to support these different ways of doing business. We also made upgrades to the development counter in City Hall for personal protection, and later returned to part-time in-person services 2 days a week. We implemented new data sharing, storage, and collaboration tools with the help of the IT department and COVID relief funding. Our largest service area, the development center, was the most impacted, but I can tell you that we had impacts in other business lines, and we managed to keep the design, bid, build, inspect capital program moving along and to keep up with our other responsibilities. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was easy. There were definitely rough patches, but our staff and our customers showed true resilience, and as we have leaned into this together, we've made it work, and I am very proud of our development services team as well as the community and how we partnered to get through this. Another accomplishment to highlight, but not necessarily to take credit for, is the rebound in housing production in Springfield. This has been more of a community and economic story with an assist from the City Council's housing strategy. Calendar year 2020 saw the largest number of housing units brought to market in Springfield since 2008. This includes an increase in publicly subsidized and market rate multifamily housing units. It's supported by the success of the accessory dwelling unit program. We call those ADUs. And frankly, continued strong subdivision activity. The trend looking forward is positive as the new development code and state legislated middle housing opportunities become available early summer of 2022. Moving to initiatives, looking forward to the next budget year, we most definitely have another busy slate. The new draft Housing and Commercial Development Code will be presented to the public, the Planning Commission, and then ultimately to the Council for adoption. Also, we hope to launch that development portal project, wrap up street bond project delivery, and work on the pending requirements to implement Oregon administrative rules around planning for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Our responsibilities there relate to transportation and tailpipe emissions, and the state is going to have us work to plan scenarios that can meet reduction targets. So taking a quick look at future year, things just to be aware of, North Gateway planning continues. We're going to be talking to the city manager's office and the council and the community about the potential for a street bond renewal. We've got phase 3 of the development code update, and then just some of those other things that you can see on this slide. And really that takes me to the end of the operating budget presentation, and I like to put in a little intermission slide to kind of help take that step away from operations and look at capital. But I really just have to talk about this picture for a moment because it pretty much says it all for me. I look at this picture and I see people, little people. I see place, I see quality of life. The past is represented in the old street that has served its useful life. In the present, these kids, these sidewalk superintendents are watching their cool new bike and pedestrian-friendly connector street being built. And then looking ahead, the many years this new street will provide service to these children, to their neighborhood, and to the rest of the community. This is our capital project inspector's favorite picture of the 2020 construction season, and to me, it is so symbolic of what we do in community development. and why we do that work. So let's take a high-level look at the 2022 capital budget. The complete capital budget project list and funding detail is available in the budget document under DPW Community Development. And again, please forward any questions you have to Neil Obringer in the Finance Department, and we will answer those for you. Like most, if not all, general-purpose local governments, Springfield has a 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP, that identifies needed work in the city's infrastructure asset systems of streets, pipes, swales, drainage ways, and buildings and facilities. These projects are listed by system type in the CIP, and the available funding is also identified for each project. The CIP draws projects from infrastructure plans, public input, asset management systems, and staff knowledge. The CIP is updated every 2 years through a public process and is adopted by the City Council. The capital budget, the capital budget and final adoption of the capital budget by the Council is how project priorities move from the CIP into the capital budget, and those project priorities need to be in that capital budget before the city can engage in planning, design, and construction activity. So our capital budget summary shows how the overall capital program is actually made up of both the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission's regional budget that funds upgrades to the regional wastewater conveyance and treatment system, and that's the MWMC budget, and the local Springfield capital budget. The MWMC capital budget is adopted by the MWMC Commission and ratified by Lane County, Eugene, and Springfield, who are partners in that commission. Due to the way that MWMC is staffed by Eugene and Springfield, the MWMC budget also passes through the city's capital budget. And I can say that Matt Stouter, who is our Environmental Services Director, will explain this further in his presentation. So quickly focusing on the local side of this chart, you can see how the budgeted capital program is spread across the different local infrastructure systems. Also, and as I mentioned last year, the entirety of the capital budget will not be spent in any given fiscal year because most projects are larger and cross over multiple years. However, in order to begin a project, even though it's going to take 3 years or 2 years, all of that project's funding must be in the capital budget. This next slide just shows you where capital funding comes from, and also notes again that most of those federal dollars that the Transportation Planning Program helps to secure will not pass through the budget. Now to talk a little bit about completed projects, projects that are completed or soon will be completed in budget year 2021. The school crossing projects and the Virginia Daisy Phase 1A improvements are examples of those federally funded projects that I talked about previously. And while it for the most part goes unseen, I'd like to call out the design and contracting phase of this work, and in particular the street bond, because it represents a great deal of effort and sets the stage for a big 2021 construction delivery year as we wrap up those bond projects. And so what I'm saying is, in the background, the bulk of the bond projects have been going through design, bid, and preparation for construction in 2021. And in fiscal 2022 is when you're going to see the majority of that work happen out on the street. I'd also like to share that really during this busy year, the Capital Group has also managed 3 retirements and a position turnover, and recruited another position authorized by Council in 2020, and all while continuing to deliver this program in the COVID environment. So I just want to tell you how proud I am of that group and what a great job they're doing. Looking ahead, 2022 projects, this is what we have for the planned fiscal year. I do want to say that when we talk about wrapping up the street bond in 22, There will most likely be one last project crossing the finish line, mostly in fall of 2022, which technically is the first quarter of fiscal 2023. But those technicalities notwithstanding, this is a major success story. The citizens have placed their trust in their government, and we have delivered. Engineering staff began street bond project design in 2019, soon after the voters approved that bond in November of 2018, and before the first year of the bond levy on the tax rolls in July 19. So we just hit the ground running. And while the levy runs concurrently for 5 years, all eight of the funded bond projects are expected to have finished up construction by late calendar 2022, which I am happy to report is well ahead of schedule. Quick look at future considerations. They're fairly consistent with last year's look ahead. We're highlighting asset liabilities in building and facilities, re-engaging Gateway Beltline for a final solution that picks up the North Gateway expansion area, beginning to implement wastewater and stormwater improvements based on master plan findings and recommendations, and then just some of that other work that you see on the slide. There's sometimes when I think about future year considerations, there's a bullet that I would put on this slide that has nothing on it, because more than likely there are future year considerations waiting for us out there that we have not thought about yet. And with that, I'm going to stop and say a big thank you again for your time and interest. Remind you to send your questions on to our budget official, Neil Obringer. And just in closing, I would like to say this photo is not a fake. It's clearly a real dashboard cell phone picture of a gaggle of geese using the push-button activated signal crossing on Franklin by Interstate 5. This is from several years ago. Frankly, I doubt the geese pushed the signal activation button, but clearly something about this enhanced safety infrastructure appealed to those geese. And with that, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to another great year.